Okay, so in today's class we are going to discuss like how to develop OData service by using a BAPI with an implementation technique. In the last class I have explained the BAPI usage in OData service with mapping technique. But in today's class we are going to discuss OData service with BAPI with implementation technique. So let me write that here. Developing OData ABAP service with BAPI but without mapping. With BAPI but without mapping. So the same scenario which I explained in the last class, I want to develop that scenario but without mapping I want to do it. So in that case what you can do is, first of all, according to step 1, you can create a project with the default settings. You can create a project with default settings. That's a very common step. And in step 2, we can create an entity type and entity set with DDIC structure. So I'm using a DDIC structure for output fields, that is BAPI SFL DAT. In the last class also we have done the same thing. You can create entity type, entity set with DDIC structure for output fields. So let me do those two things first, then we'll proceed further. So you can see I'm creating a project here in SEGW. In SEGW, without mapping, I want to develop this. You can use some project name. We are developing a service. And you can save it in package in real time. So you will get data model, service implementation, runtime artifacts, service maintenance, etc., etc. Data model, service implementation, runtime artifacts, service maintenance, all these things you'll get it. So first of all, let me create entity type, entity set. So you can right click. It's similar to last class, so you can right click data model, import DIC structure. And as I told you, in this screen, we are trying to provide entity type name, for example, flight. And I'm using DDIC structure BAPI SFL DAT. BAPI SFL DAT, and I'm trying to create one entity set also. Entity type, dictionary structure, and entity set. This is same as previous class, but the main purpose of today's class is not to use mapping. So you can create an entity type, entity set, and you can click on next button, and you can choose the required fields here. You can choose the required fields here, whichever you want. And you can click on next here, make one of the field as a key field in entity type level. You can make one of the field as key field under entity type. And you can just click on finish. So that is how we can create entity type and entity set. Flight is entity type, flight set is entity set. And flight is an entity type and it contains all these properties. They are nothing but fields. They are nothing but fields here. So that is what we need to do here. Let me write that. So here to do this, you can just, these are the initial classes, so let me write some step by step. Right click your data model and provide entity type equal to, for example, flight. Provide entity set. That means by default you will get entity set as flight set. And you can provide DDIC structure, that is like BAPI SFL DAT. You can create like this. And then choose required fields and make, for example, airline field as a key field, airline ID as key field, and then save. That's it. That is what we need to do as part of step 2 for creating entity type and entity set. So here we have to create entity type, entity set according to that step 2 procedure. So after doing this, now I don't want to maintain any mapping, so directly you have to generate the runtime classes. If you want to go with mapping technique, first maintain mapping, then generate the classes. In mapping technique, first we maintain the mapping, then we generate the classes. But if you are not using mapping, then as soon as you create entity type, entity set, you have to generate the classes. So I mean to say, this is what happens. So in mapping, if you use mapping technique, and if you don't use mapping, let us understand what exactly you need to do. In mapping and without mapping. So in mapping technique, what generally we do is we create entity type, then you have to create entity set, and then you have to maintain mapping. After that, you can generate runtime objects or runtime artifacts. Entity type, entity set, mapping, then generate runtime artifacts. So in this case, code is auto-generated. In this case, code is auto-generated. So this is the step-by-step procedure in mapping. But in case of without mapping, so definitely you have to create entity type, entity set. Definitely you have to create entity type, entity set. There is no doubt. So immediately after creating entity type, entity set, we can directly go for generating artifacts. We immediately generate runtime artifacts here as soon as you create entity type and entity set. And after generating these runtime artifacts, we are going to write the code. As a developer, we have to write the code explicitly. In mapping, we don't write, the code is auto-generated, but in without mapping technique, as a developer, you need to write the code explicitly. You need to write the code explicitly. So it's your responsibility. So that is the difference in the procedure. So let me go to the next level. You can see directly after saving, I am going to generate runtime objects. I can click on generate runtime objects and it will create all these classes: MPC class, extension class, DPC class, extension class, model, service. I told you several times these classes will be generated, and I gave some basic introduction about these classes. So just directly generate those classes and you can save it in package in real time. You generate your test those things now. You can see this. So let me write that step here. Step 3, generate runtime artifacts. Step 4, what you need to do. As I told you, without mapping means it's completely a responsibility of a developer to implement the code. But as a developer, please remember, we write the code always in DPC extension class. So you may see several classes, but whatever you see, it is not for you. Please remember this principle as far as OData services are concerned. There are some things which are internally used by the framework. There are some things which are used by the framework internally, but as a developer, we have to explicitly implement the code in DPC extension class. That is a developer related data provider class. So DPC extension, let me double click that. So when you double click, you'll get some methods. You'll get several methods like this. You'll get several methods. And if you closely observe these methods, you can see under method section, there are 5 important methods, like for an entity set. Flight set is our entity set here. Flight set is our entity set. So for flight set, which is an entity set, we have CRUD methods here. These are the CRUD methods of entity set. These are the CRUD methods of our entity set. As I told you already, every entity set contains 5 CRUD methods. Everyone knows now. Those who are attending from the beginning, you know that every entity set contains 5 CRUD methods. As of now, we are dealing with a single entity set, so you can see only 5 methods for that. If you create another one, then definitely you'll get 5 more CRUD methods. So now what you need to do, so let me write here. So internally, 5 CRUD methods generated for our entity set. So please notice that. So now in step 4, what you need to do is you can go to DPC extension class. You can go to DPC extension class, and in DPC extension class, you can use get entity set method. You can use get entity set method. If you want to write the code here, first you click change option. First click on change option. After that, you can choose that method and click on redefine option. You can choose that method here and you can click on redefine option. So it will open the implementation. When you click on redefine, so it is opening the parameters. It is opening these parameters here, and you can see this is the implementation where you need to write the code. There is a method and end method. There is a method option along with end method. So in between that, as a developer, you can write your functionality. So here, when you're writing the code, you can write all your, when you're writing the code, you can write all your database operations or ABAP operations. So you can use almost all your ABAP statements inside this method whenever, wherever necessary. So please let me recap this statement. As a developer, we can use any ABAP statement except GUI screen related statements. As an ABAPer or as a developer, we can write any ABAP statement but except GUI screen related statements. So I've already covered this point. So please notice that. Why? Because screen related operations, we are going to do it from the front end, UI5 or Fiori. Only for database operations, we generally use OData service. But for screen designing, we make use of the front end applications like UI5 and Fiori. So please remember this. But as of now, my intention is to call a BAPI. As of now, my intention is to call a BAPI, and here you can see get entity set method. Get entity set method contains a standard parameter that is ET entity set. ET entity set is the standard parameter of every get entity set method. So as a developer, you need to use ET entity set whenever you want to transfer the records to the front-end applications. If you want to transfer the records to front-end applications, then you have to use ET entity set method. You have to use ET entity set method. Sorry, ET entity set is a parameter, not a method. ET entity set is a parameter which is compulsory. You have to use it when you want to transfer data to front-end application. So please remember that. Now, why don't you call a BAPI here by using call function statement? BAPI flight something like get list. BAPI flight get list is our BAPI. And you can have a tables option. Under tables option, there is a flight list. There is a flight list, and this flight list is a tables parameter in a BAPI, and those records I want to send it to front end by using ET entity set here. That's it. Our flight list records of a BAPI, we are sending it to front end by using ET entity set parameter. We are trying to copy records from flight list to ET entity set, so in the front end they can access these records. So let me just give some clarity with some diagram. Okay, let me go with another diagram here. So what we are trying to do here, it's very simple. This is a OData service implementation. Let me explain with a simple diagram. This is SAP NetWeaver gateway service. That is nothing but our OData service. Now, but screens will be designed in the front end. That will come at later point of time. SAP UI5 or Fiori, it doesn't matter, whatever. So front-end applications we are going to design at later point of time, but at present I can say this flight list records of a BAPI we are going to copy into an entity set, which is a standard parameter. We are copying flight list records into ET entity set, which is a standard parameter of this method, and this particular ET entity set is going to supply the records to the front end. This is what happens. So in the front end, definitely the records can be displayed in a table, or records can be displayed in a graph, or records can be displayed inside drop down, or it can be displayed in radio buttons, or it can be row repeater. It can be row repeater. So these are all different screen elements. So in the front end, you can display those output records under different screen elements. So what I mean to say is, whichever records comes to each entity set, those records we are going to show it in the front end by developing screens using UI5 framework. So this is what happens. It's very simple. So I saved that file. So this is what happens. Now let me write a simple note. Okay, first go data provider extension class. Data provider extension class, then redefine flight set. You have to redefine that particular method and implement below code. Implement below code. So let me copy that code for our reference. This is the code I'm trying to use. Very simple code. And here, let me write a simple note so that you can remember. So ET underscore entity set, it is a standard parameter for transferring records to front-end application. Front-end application can be anything, but it is going to transfer data to front-end application. It is a standard parameter for transferring records to front-end application like UI5 or Fiori. And don't forget a basic point here, it is going to act like an internal table. It can act like an internal table. Why? Because you can see ET entity set is referring to a table type. Let me just give that here. What I mean to say is our ET entity set will act like an internal table because it is referring to a table type. TT means table type. ET entity set is referring to TT, that is table type, so you can utilize it as an internal table. So that means it acts like an internal table for transferring, it acts like an internal table for transferring 0, 1 or many records. 0, 1 or many records to front end. And most importantly, I can say ET entity set, it refers to the table type. ET entity set, it always refers to a table type. So I told you, whenever you create entity type and whenever you create an entity set, the table structure, table type, both will be registered in model provider class. Whenever you create entity type, entity set, the table type, table structure, both will be registered inside the model provider class. So you can see now it is utilizing that. You can see here it is trying to utilize your model provider class, MPC. That means it will utilize model provider class, and in that there is a table type with flight. So MP contains metadata, and that metadata we are trying to use it inside our DPC extension class. The metadata which is registered in MPC class can be utilized inside data provider extension class for doing some operations. So let me just write this. I've already covered that, but let me write, because this is the right time to easily digest these things. So you can see now, right now we are inside data provider extension class. We have written the code inside get entity set method of data provider extension class. But while writing the code inside DPC extension class, you can refer the metadata which is registered in model provider class. So that is a point you need to notice. So I can say, as a developer, we can utilize the metadata like table type or structure type, something like that. We can utilize metadata like table type, structure type of model provider class inside data provider extension class. So please notice that. The metadata which is registered in model provider class can be utilized inside data provider extension class. Can be utilized inside data provider extension class. So please notice that. Very simple but important. So there are some things which you need to have on fingertips. So let me go further now. When we go for coming examples, you'll get more and more clarity on this framework. Don't worry. And moreover, please don't expect every concept in a single example. It's very difficult for me to explain. I'll cover different concepts in different examples. Okay, but don't expect the real-time scenario directly in the first or second class. That is highly impossible for explaining. So as a trainer, I'll try to go in detail with each and every point from basic to high level. Okay, so for some things which you are expecting, you have to wait for some time till I cover that concept, because first class or second class or 10th class, I can't cover everything. So expectations will be high. because most of the people are from most of the people are working people, and most of they are from ABAP background or some portal background. So, but as a trainer, you have to understand my problem as well. It's a new technology. Definitely, I'll try to take you to a good level so that you can develop your applications in real time as well. Okay? Yeah, so then let me go further here. I'm activating now. Just you can go back. You can activate your DPC extension class. After doing that, let me save it here. Step 6, activate entire data provider extension class. Okay, then step 7. Then what you do is go to service maintenance. And you have to register the service. Go to service maintenance and register the service under gateway server. That means under hub system. We technically call it as hub system. Then step 8. Open gateway client and test the service. This is a general procedure. So let me do all those things. I'm going to service maintenance, and under service maintenance there is a register button here. So there is a register button here, and I can register under a gateway server. My gateway server is locally available, so I can select that and you can click on continue. And you can in real time save it in a package, don't forget that. Then you can continue. And after this you can say there is a gateway client. You can click on that for testing purpose. Let me go to that. And the testing can be same like your previous scenario. So let me select entity set here. I'm selecting an entity set that is flight set. Flight set is an entity set, and you can just execute the service. So you can see we are able to get those flight records. AA American Airlines. As I told you, the data when you are testing, it will be displayed in XML format. There is no surprise here. In the very beginning of our course, I told you the data will be retrieved while testing in XML format. So similarly, you can see there are several records here. Delta Airlines, New York to Frankfurt. And similarly, Lufthansa Airlines, Frankfurt to New York. And similarly, Singapore Airlines, Quanta Airways, etc., etc. So we'll get all the records here. Singapore Airlines, etc. So whatever records are coming to flight set, we are able to display. We are able to get it successfully. So when you try to execute a service with this particular pattern, by providing an entity set here, so definitely it is going to send all the records. This is to fetch all records. You can fetch all records here by using that URL. And say, for example, to fetch the count, record count. So you can use all our previous URLs which I explained. You can use /$count. Entity set name, you can use entity set name /$count. You can use entity set name then /$count, that is to fetch record count. Let me try here. $count. So there won't be any problem while testing. Testing will be same whether you use mapping or whether you don't use mapping. It doesn't matter. Testing point of view, the URLs will remain same irrespective of your technique. Well, you may use mapping technique or you may not use mapping technique, but testing wise, the syntaxes remain same. That is the point. So you can see now there are 390 records here. We are able to get that count with 390 records. And say for example, I want to fetch the data in JSON format. I told you question mark, you can use dollar format equal to JSON. JSON. That is one type of format to display the records. So you can see data is displayed in JSON format record by record. You can see this. Airline ID, airline, American Airlines. So like that you can get all the records here. You can see airline, Delta Airlines. So this type of format, we call it as JSON format. So default, if you don't provide any format, it will take XML while testing. To fetch records in JSON format. So you can use this type of path. You can use this type of path. And to fetch records with specific fields. To fetch records with specific fields, then what you can do, as I told you already, after entity set, you can make use of question mark dollar select equal to airline ID, for example, comma, airline, or you can use like price, whatever. So you will get records with only 3 fields now. So let me test with that. Question mark dollar select equal to airline ID, comma, airline, comma, price. It's case sensitive. The URLs are case sensitive. Please remember that. ABAP coding is not case sensitive. OData service coding is not case sensitive. But while testing the services, the URLs are case sensitive. Okay, please notice that. Sometimes that may frustrate you. Case sensitiveness may frustrate you, but you should be with cool mind. So you can see now we are able to get records with only 3 fields, airline ID, airline, and price because of this URL. You can see for every record you will get the same thing. So this is the syntax. Now, so as of today, we are trying to test our service from our SAP NetWeaver gateway client. This is like one of the tools for testing your service, whether you are getting the data or not, whether operation is successful or not. So SAP NetWeaver gateway client is one of the option here. So SAP NetWeaver gateway, you can see here, this is one of our tool to test our services, and this is a tool coming from SAP side. But what I mean to say is OData is a generic concept. OData is not a concept introduced by SAP. OData is a general concept. OData is a general concept, and so this general concept is utilized by SAP for providing mobile access facility and desktop facility and device independent facility and different things which I explained already in the very first class. So what I mean to say is, we have developed an OData ABAP service, but OData is a general concept. OData is not a proprietary concept of SAP. OData concept is an open source concept that is used by SAP inside ABAP environment. So what I mean to say is, you can see here, just let me write a note, OData concept is from Microsoft, company who has introduced this OData concept. But SAP has utilized this OData concept in SAP ABAP environment, and we are calling it as OData ABAP service. So please remember this. So why I'm telling this point? Because OData concept is a generic concept and it is used by SAP in ABAP environment, and we are calling it as OData ABAP service. So what I can say is, as I told you, OData service is a generic concept, so definitely you can test your services on other tools as well. You need not use always Gateway Client. Gateway Client is a tool introduced in SAP environment, but there are other third-party tools where you can test your OData services, because OData services are general services. So I mean to say, for testing any service developed using OData principles, any service which is developed using OData technique, any service which is developed using OData technique. So we can use one of the tool like SAP NetWeaver Gateway Client. Okay, that is SAP specific tool. And the second one is, you can also use like REST client. That is like a third-party tool available in your browser. It's like third-party tool, or whatever is non-SAP, you can call it as a non-SAP tool. But still you can test your OData services. Even then you can test your OData services. So that is the point. Now just let me open that. You can see, let me just open that somewhere here, and I'm in Firefox. In Firefox, you can see right side there is a REST client option here. Right side in the browser, you can see there is a REST client option. You can see my box, and it is like a REST client for testing OData services or RESTful services, or OData services. Some people will call it as web service. It doesn't matter now. So, but you can use this REST client. So let me use that. You can see now. I'm opening that tool. So this is a REST client. It's a third-party, a browser-based non-SAP tool. Now what you can do is, you can provide this URL now. You can use this particular complete URL under your REST client under URL section. SAP, OPU, OData, then this is your service name. This is your service name, and you can use /flight set. Flight set is our entity set. If everything goes right, then definitely you'll get some username and password. If everything goes fine, then you will get the records into REST client. So you can see now, you can go to response body. Under response body, you can see these records. American Airlines, and similarly you can see output records like there are several records here. So whatever we used to do, you can see Delta Airlines. So what I mean to say is whatever we test at gateway client level, the same thing you can do it from REST client. So that means without connecting to SAP server, from REST client you can directly provide the URL in order to test the service. For developer, this is just like an alternative tool, but it is not compulsory that you should know this. It is just like an alternative tool. Because after completing the class, what happens is when you refer SAP forums, they'll say REST client, and you people will be totally panic. I don't want my students to be panic. That's the reason why I'm just introducing what is REST client and what we can do here. So every time I may do under gateway client, but after completing the course, if you open the forums, then you will find REST client and you will be a little bit frustrated and worried. So no frustration, no worries, and just be cool, but by the end of the course, definitely you'll get some clarity. What we can do, what we can achieve, what are the advantages, everything you'll understand. Okay, right, so now you can see here, let me try with other URLs. Say for example, I want to just get the count, then that is also possible. You can use /$count in REST client, and definitely you can see under response body, you can see there is a count with 390 records. Under response body, you can see count with 390. And say for example, I want to get the records in JSON format. Then you can use like something like $$ format equal to JSON. I'm trying, I'm not sure, but let me check. You can see here. When you go to response body, you can see the records in JSON format. Record by record, you can get it here. So REST client is also going to support both types of formats while displaying, JSON as well as XML. You can see the record by record pattern, left side field name, right side value. Okay, so let me just conclude here as of today. As a developer, we can use same URL patterns. URL patterns, and some people will call it as URI patterns, but technically they are same, no need to worry. We can use same URL patterns or UI patterns for testing OData web services in SAP Gateway Client as well as in REST client. So just notice that. So with this, I want to stop for today. If you have any doubt, you can ask me now. I'll come one by one.
Okay.